All right, and we're live. That is my trademark intro, of course. There was someone, I forget who it was, but it was probably another YouTuber who went on a tirade about beginning videos with that word. Just saying, all right, it does bespeak a kind of a lack of creativity, um, or at least lack of foresight and planning, that you can't script something better than saying all right to begin every stream. But it's sort of my pattern at the moment, so I'm sticking with it until I come up with a better. I think Harris Sultan does it too. Hey Alejandro, hey GW, finally it's about time. It's a Pakistani ex-Muslim atheist who's a very popular YouTuber in his native country. I think he was born in Pakistan. He lives in Australia, and he has an Australian accent. He's kind of an interesting guy. If he has something called Harris's, I think it's Harris's House of Sin, which is a podcast where he goes over. He focuses on Islam a lot, obviously, and he goes over news a lot of the time from Pakistan and India, the Indian subcontinent, particularly as it relates to Islam and sometimes Hinduism as well, and intercommunal conflicts, but especially Islam's, and it's, you can see this in Pakistan. It's in its undiluted form, a sort of ratcheting up of religiosity among Muslims, even though Pakistan was conquered by the Arabs, and South Asian Muslims in particular are looked down upon within the Arabian Muslim community. They sort of vie to be the most Muslim. Yeah, I got a haircut. I got a very cheap haircut, which I'm not endeavoring to repeat. It's kind of interesting. Everyone has their own theories regarding hairstyling, and I think for men it's very different. I've had dozens and dozens of haircuts. I think the first one when I was 11, when I was 10 or 11, I forget the exact age, but I went to a traditional Italian barbershop in Brooklyn, and I've gotten numerous haircuts over the years. And the thing is, even in my experience, the worst haircuts the best haircuts have been slightly above average. I mean, they've done a good job. If they're very skilled, I can appreciate it on a certain level, but I'm not stunned. It's not like you see, you watch a TV show and a woman goes in for a really marvelous hair, goes to a hair salon, and she's totally transformed. And I think that's reflective of, I mean, that does happen. But I've never had that experience where I've had a haircut that's completely transformed my face, or or just so stunning. Like I said, the best ones are okay. I mean, they're good. I can appreciate them on a certain level, but I've never they've never like blown me out of the water. Whereas the worst haircuts, if you have a barber that's completely incompetent, they'll completely destroy your hairline for for months or sometimes indefinitely. Um, yeah, that's. I mean, I completely shaven my head, but I've gotten, especially during the summer months, I've gotten buzz cuts, which are a lot more manageable, and they do look pretty good, at least for me. I know it's different. Some people have different, differently shaped heads, and they it might not it might clash with other parts of your face. So it's not for everyone, but I actually think buzz cuts for me look pretty good. And short hair is a lot more manageable. But I don't think I've ever I've never understood spending a lot of money for a haircut. The cheap haircut, the really cheap one, I'll probably avoid in the future. That's not a spectacular idea. Word of advice, but I'm not go. I don't think it's persuaded me to spend a fortune on my next haircut. I think uh, the middle path is probably the best option, a reasonably priced um, haircut. That was a bit of a tangent on haircuts. I think just because someone mentioned it, otherwise I would. But I think it's worth discussing at least for a couple of minutes. Um, and it's true. I think it's accurate. I mean, women, particularly feminists, complain about the quote unquote pink tax, which is this belief that women are overcharged for certain things, which it doesn't really make sense on a number of levels. First of all, if they don't want to pay a lot for a haircut, they can go to a barber and just have them chop it off. Hi, Tim. They don't need to go to an expensive hair salon to get cut and washed and styled. I mean, one of the reasons that it's so expensive is because there's a lot more effort involved. Um, and like I said, if they just want to have it chopped, they can go to they can go to a geriatric Italian barber somewhere in Bensonhurst or Bay Ridge and just tell them to, and they'll be charged the same price. I mean, these are preset prices for, say, it's $15 for a haircut, or $25 for a haircut and wash. They have that alternative, but also it's it's more expensive for a reason, I think, because there's not much you can do to style a man's hair that that will require you to plop down, $120. I mean, you could go there are these. I mean, that's what wealthy these celebrities do. Like, I think there was an essay once on Conan O'Brien, his hairstylist, and comparing that to a cut at Supercuts, and the guy showed a frame by frame. He was kind of comparing and contrasting, and his conclusion was that the Supercuts cut might have actually been better, despite the yeah, or barber college. You can get your hair cut for free, basically, if you go to a school where they train hairstylists who just need practice. Uh, I wouldn't recommend that for some things. I mean, if you, but I've been to the NY, and the dentist there, or the treatment there is just as good as a dentist that's been, that you spend hundreds of dollars to see. I'm sure there are exceptions, but I think a lot of I mean, that part of the feminist critique makes a certain amount of sense. The idea, but again, they isolate these examples that pertain to women, but it's just a broader societal issue, just being charged a premium for certain things that aren't really that aren't really of value. I mean, some people, and a lot of that is people think that that the price itself is providing value, which in some cases it is, but in a lot of cases it's simply it's just a name or a reputation that might be unearned. Anyway, that was about 8 minutes on hair, which I did not expect. Oh yeah, going back to the original point. Yeah, Harris. What was my original point? Oh yeah, I was talking about Harris Sultan. Yeah, he's an interesting guy. I had a debate with him about Abraham. I think it's funny, and I brought this up with some folks in my church. How take a box of band-aids with. I've only gotten nicked once during a haircut, believe it or not. I've had other terrible results where I didn't bleed out, but yeah, about Abraham. I remember, it's funny because now I'm a moderator on his channel, but I remember debating him about the Bible, and he kind of holds the view of a lot of atheists that the Bible is just a series of myths, and by myths I mean myths in the sense of fabulism, just these confected tales designed for specific purpose, like cohering the nation of Israel. And this is one of the things a lot of people say, that Yahweh is simply simply a monotheistic God that was created in order to bind these dispersed tribes together into one cohesive ethnic, one ethnos, one nation, and that there were that simply is. And he actually believes in a lot of that, particularly that the characters described in the Bible are fictitious creations, that they're myths along the lines of Hercules or other mythological figures from Greece or Rome that became part of the pantheon of deities. And I had this debate with him about Abraham, and one of the rationales for this belief is that there's no archaeological evidence attesting to the existence of these figures. So in other words, you don't have inscriptions or records from this period attesting to these figures. Now, I think there are a number of problems with this. The most obvious one, of course, is, or at least you don't have a testament to these figures outside of the Bible. And the Bible, even parts of the Bible like Luke, Acts, which are historically verified, where you have actual extra biblical evidence, and which read like histories. If you read the Gospel of Luke or the Acts of the Apostles, they read like historical documents. They don't read like mythology. If you've ever read, or even quasi mythological histories like Herodotus, they read like if they're rejected by atheists because they also describe miraculous events, and this is antithetical to an atheist worldview. They don't believe that miracles can happen, therefore they discredit the entire account. So even if you have even you have descriptions of travels and people that can be verified, which is very rare for ancient documents, it's still are outside the gambit of someone who is a skeptic. But the problem with this, especially when you're looking at the Old Testament, is there would not be a record of these individuals. I mean, there are kings and monarchs and despots that ruled huge areas of land and had thousands of subjects, which we have hardly any record of. I mean, even some of the kings described in the Bible, the non-Israeli kings, the record that we have to prove these people existed is virtually nil. I mean, outside of the Bible itself. So to say that a landowner, a Jewish landowner from millennia, that there would be extant archives attesting to this person's existence is absurd on its face. You know, you would not imagine, imagine 2,000, 2,500 years from now, would there be any record of my existence? No, of course not. I mean, if YouTube still existed, which is dubious, maybe my channel, if it hadn't been banned, would still exist. But there would be other than that, there would be virtually no I mean, even my birth certificate would probably have vanished by that point. So it's kind of odd that you use this as a measuring stick. But I think a bigger issue is there's no there's no indication that if you provided this evidence, say if there was forensic evidence that of the bones of Abraham and Sarah and Ishmael and Isaac, not only the reputed grave site or the tomb where they were ostensibly buried, but if we had scientific, quote, evidence of these people, I don't think it would persuade someone who was antithetical to the notion of there being a creator, a monotheistic God that's described in the Bible. And the chief reason is there's more extant evidence, extra biblical evidence for Jesus's existence. And it's not persuasive to people who reject the deity of Christ. So I mean, and it's true, Jesus is the most there's more abundant evidence for Jesus's existence than any other historical figure from ancient times, and that's simply indisputable. There's no think he was resurrected, and whether you think he was the Son of God, and whether you accept or reject the truth claims of the New Testament. Regardless of any of that, what's been established is that he is the most thoroughly documented figure in the ancient world. Yeah, the Jewish. This goes into another topic: the whole idea of Muslims trying to say that Israel isn't Jewish land, or that Jews didn't live there, which is ironic considering the quote unquote Palestinians are the descendants, unless they're Samaritans or Christians or the forced converts to Islam. Palestinians are basically the descendants of Muslim Arab invaders from the 7th century. So before the mid to late, as it's currently constituted, or even biblical Israel, these are all the descendants of people that invaded from Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Peninsula. They don't have any relationship to the ancient Canaanites or the Philistines, despite the name Palestinian. They don't have a connection there. Is the audio? Oh no. Oh man. I'm probably going to have to change the title of this, but that would really stink if this is just half garbled. Okay, good. I'm glad. Might have to check that later, but it's good that you can hear me now, at least. But yeah, going back to that, this idea that you can't. First of all, there is a good chunk. Not that I think that this is a valid critique, because it accepts the premise that the Bible is not historical, and it is. It's not simply a historical record, obviously, but that is a component of the Bible. These things did happen. These are real places. I mean, like, to just give you an example, Jezebel, the consort or the wife of Ahab, they actually have found royal seals with her name, YZBL. So I mean, that's just one example. There are, look at it this way: before the Tel Dan stele was discovered, people thought David was a mythological figure. I mean, people who were not believers, who rejected the Bible, they thought King David was a completely mythological figure. So before the 20th century, the academic consensus was that David did not exist. The most important king of Israel described in the Old Testament. Yeah, I heard about that. John Harris actually talked about this a little in his podcast, his last podcast. But getting back to so this idea that there isn't historical. First of all, there is historical archaeological evidence to verify much of the Bible, but also, I think it's it's kind of a red herring. If you're willing to reject the evidence for Jesus, I don't think you're in a position to demand evidence for biblical patriarchs and and other important figures within the Bible, because you can always justify yourself by saying, well, of course Jesus existed. Um, but also, I think that is a significant point. This idea that that atheists reject the Bible as history because of their rejection of God. It's not a dispassionate academic response. It's tied up in their own belief system, their own convictions that uh, Jesus is not Jesus is not Lord, and the things described in the Bible are simply fiction. But they're not analyzing this from a critical lens. They're basically just they're looking at it emotionally, in my opinion, because, like I said, Luke Acts is stands up against any historical document from this period, from the first century AD. If you actually read it for yourself, it it stands up as an historical document. So I think, and I know that I'm gonna have to change the title of this, but just to sum up, I think um, uh, this belief hinges on a number of conceits. The idea that the Bible is not historical, the idea that even if you could flesh out parts of the Old Testament that are not spoken of by history, by things like archaeological digs, for example, that if you could do that, that would persuade people who are intent on rejecting the Bible. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think that stands up when you actually examine this issue. Um, but and again, it's I think it is very than someone being convinced. And a great example of this is Richard Dawkins. When he was pressed on this issue, an interviewer asked him what would persuade him to believe in God, and theoretically, what could happen? What could God do to persuade him of his existence? And he said, well, if I used to think if someone wrote out if there was a message that God wrote in the sky directed specifically at me, perhaps I would be persuaded to recant my convictions and I would no longer be an atheist. And then he said, but then I thought about it and I realized, that could have been done by aliens and or extraterrestrials. And the upshot is he basically said there was nothing that could be done to convince him that he was wrong. And the thing is, once you reach that point, you're no longer a skeptic. If you're just adamantly clinging to your belief in spite of any contradictory evidence, you're no longer a skeptic. You're a dogmatist. Only you're dogmatist in favor of unbelief rather than religion. Publius Lentulus, who was a ruler of Judea and predecessor of Pilate and contemporary of Jesus Christ, the logic of the yeah, there are tons. I mean, Pliny the Younger, Tacitus, Josephus, wrote about Christ, there are disputes over whether some of the things are interpolations where he describes Christ, Jesus being as a god, because Josephus was not a follower of Christ. He wasn't a Christian, but the parts which describe Christ's life, or Jesus as a historical figure, those are authentic. And you have tons of this. There was someone who wrote an entire book, the Case for Christ, where he goes over historical documents. The stand for evidence is not clear. If you establish a standard that it's impossible to meet, then it's not really you're not really looking for evidence. Anyway, I will end the stream now. But thanks, Richard, GW, Alejandro, and anyone else for watching or lurking, the people that liked.